Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be looking at how to play against the Grand Prix attack. That's the opening that happens after e4, c5, knight c3, knight c6, and then we're going to have white go ahead and play f4 here, and this begins what we call the Grand Prix. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and please click on your notification icon. So anyways, the Grand Prix attack is a super aggressive system that's actually very dangerous, and you do have to have preparation against it. If you just play really slow, natural moves against the Grand Prix attack, you can actually get into a lot of trouble. So just to give you an idea of what kind of people are going for, they're kind of going for these setups where black plays g6. And by the way, g6 is a perfectly legitimate try. This is a very reasonable move. And then say knight f3, bishop g7, bishop c4. And now I'm going to have black kind of play a second-rate move here. Like, really what black should do is play something like e6 here. But instead, I'm going to have black just go ahead and just play his normal chess. You know, let's just develop pieces. And white's going to castle, knight f6, d3, castles, f5. So this is kind of what white's going for in the Grand Prix. White's plan is to play f5. Eventually he wants to play f captures g6. He wants to play queen h4, queen e1 to h4, and then he can either bring this bishop to h6 or g5. He can also bring this knight to g5, and he can start making mate threats. So just to give you an example, if I were to play kind of really passive chess, if I were to just kind of play a6, which doesn't seem passive, it's a pretty natural move in the position to try to play b5 and b4. Then white could continue by exchanging and playing queen e1, preparing queen h4, b5, bishop b3, and then let's say just another kind of passive move, e6, to keep, white out of knight d5. And then we would have queen h4, b4, and at this point, black would actually be lost. I mean, it looks like we're just making normal, natural moves, but at this point, white can actually ignore what we're doing on the queen side. White could play a move like knight g5 here, and the game is over. We do not actually have a way to prevent rook f6 followed by queen h7 mate. So this is kind of what white's going for. White wants black to just kind of get into a holding pattern, and then he's going to move his pieces over to the king side, and he's going to play for mate. And this is why it's really critical that we need preparation. So, I mean, here, for example, if we played bc3, we would have rook f6, and we would resign. And there isn't really a good move here. We don't have a great move here at this point. We're simply losing. So, going back, at the outset of the Grand Prix, we have to be aware of this plan. Well, we have to be cognizant of it, that this is what white's trying to do. And we have to, we have kind of two options. So option number one is we can immediately just blunt that plan and just prevent that plan from ever taking place and just get a nice, comfortable position with black, like either equality or slight edge black. And that's usually the road that I go down just because I just don't feel like trying to refute something. It seems like a lot of preparation to try to refute it. The other path that we can go down is we can try to refute it. And trying to refute the Grand Prix is actually kind of interesting. What it is you allow white to go down that Grand Prix path pretty much as far as he can, and then he bites granite at a certain point. So let me give you an idea. So if you're going to try to refute it, like, you should really try to play like g6 and bishop g7. I really think this is the best line. And after bishop c4, you should play e6. And then after f5, if you really want to refute it, you can actually just take this pawn. You can actually just play g takes f5. The other way that people play this, which is pretty reasonable, and you can get to this from two different move orders. You can get to this from the move order that I'm going to recommend as your main line, which is instead of g6 and bishop g7, just to play e6. But also, you can get to it from this move order. And here you can play knight e7. And again, it just depends how ambitious you are. When they play f captures e6, you have two very nice choices here. You can actually just play d captures e6, which is a really simple position to play. I would actually call this just slight edge black without having to go any further. You're not going to get mated, nothing crazy, nothing scary is going to happen. You have good control of the d4 square. You're going to finish your development with either a6, b5 or b6, bishop b7. And black is doing really good. This is a really good way to play. This was my preference for years. And then if you want to try to refute it, you can play f takes e6. And this gets kind of messy, but we do kind of have a path here that people have gone down. After d3, people have kind of castled. It's also possible to play super aggressive, just to play d5 and then immediately b5. Like this is also possible. And these positions are messy, like to say the least. Like white can actually get away with sacrificing his piece here, even after queens come off the board. White has compensation for the material here, so these positions are actually kind of unclear, to say the least. But black is certainly doing okay here as well. Black is up a piece. So these positions are up clear, even though black is up a piece. But there's another way that we can play this, of course. We can get our king out of the middle first. We can castle. And then after castles, we can play d5 and then bishop b3. And then the way a lot of top players have been playing this is just knight a5, just going after this bishop pair. Bishop g5, knight b3, ab3. And now there's a couple of top games that have gone down the path of pawn to d4 here. And it's not clear that this was the best move, but this is the path they went down. They played d4, knight e2, and then e5. And then white kind of continued with his normal type of attack, and then black had to just kind of finish his development, but black usually ended up being a-okay here in these positions. So these positions turned out to be, roundabouts level. There was a good game between Kuzin and Ivanov in this position that was played in Smolensk back in 2001. So, and that ended in a draw. So these positions were about level. If you really want to take a crack at maybe getting closer to refutation, h6 is possible. And then after bishop e7, you actually just can sacrifice this pawn and just play with two bishops. You can just play bishop d7, and playing with the two bishops is fine. But I would say, like, if you're going to play, I would almost say if you're going to play the fe6 line, you might as well go full bore and just play for the mega refutation, which is gf5, which is really hard to play. So if they play e takes f5, your intention isn't to play e takes f5, you're just going to play d5 here. And then after bishop b3, you're going to play knight e7, takes, bishop e6, d3, and then b5. And this is supposed to be kind of the de facto refutation of the Grand Prix. If you play this line, black is better. It's hard for white to do anything here. For example, if white plays knight takes b5, you're going to have queen a5 check, knight c3, and then c4, and you're actually winning a whole piece, because if bishop to a4, you have bishop c3 followed by queen a4. So you're actually just winning a whole piece here. So after b5, it's difficult for white to find a good move. Black is simply quite a bit better in this position. This is slight-edged major advantage black. And so gf5 is kind of the way to play. They can do something kind of tricky, though. They can play d3, and these lines are a little bit trickier. And then you have to know this continuation. And this was actually played between De Grieve and Jones as recently as 2017. This was actually played on chess.com. It went castles and then d5, ed5, ed5, bishop b3, bishop e6. So as messy as this looks, black is actually in really good shape here. For one thing, black hasn't castled yet, so there isn't really a target. And he's actually going to make the life of this bishop very, very difficult. So when this bishop goes to c4 and then has to retreat back to b3, this is a big problem. This bishop ends up having difficulties back on c3. So then we're going to have queen e1, a6, and as you can see, he went after kind of bullying this bishop, dc4, dc4, knight e6, knight e6. The bishop got out, but then queen d4 is winning the bishop. So queen d4, and then we pick up this bishop, and he ended up winning a whole piece, and of course he went on to win the game. So, going back, if you're like me, you might not be trying to get into some of these really messy positions and going for a refutation, of course. And of course, there's other paths that white can go down in these lines as well, and you have to be familiar with all of them. So if you're like me, you just kind of want something that's like a really kind of just solid line that you can play against the Grand Prix, where you don't have to know a ton of theory, and you can get a good position every single time. Like, slight advantage black is fine, and I'm going to avoid all of the complicated, messy lines that might be associated with trying to go for some, crazy refutation. So in this case, I would recommend the move order e6. And then after bishop c4, I would actually just recommend knight on e7. So this can actually transpose. So this is another thing to keep in mind. This can actually transpose. Like if, for example, they play knight f3, we can transpose to the main line with g6, and this can ostensibly become the same thing. Although in this case, I would argue that this is a slightly better version of the main line, because eventually down the road, like let's say they play castles, and this is actually kind of a well-known line to theory, we would play something like bishop g7, d3, castles, queen e1. We could now play d5, just retreat the bishop immediately, for as much difference as it makes. And then knight a5 is just slight edge black because we're going to pick up the bishop pair, and white doesn't have enough compensation for the attack. And that's one of the reasons I recommend this particular move order to get to this line, because it precludes the early f5. I don't have to put up with the possibility of early f5. They're going to be forced to play this other line. And of course, if you play g6 in your repertoire as well, they can also go down the path of not playing the early f5. They can simply play after, say, e6, they could simply play pawn to d3. So they don't have to play an early f5 here. They could play pawn to d3, or they could castle. And as you can see, we're going to end up basically in the same spot. We're going to play d5, bishop b3, knight a5. And actually, at this point, we are following a game. We're following Aldama versus Dugrani, played in Aldama Dugrani versus Lee, played in Las Vegas in 2012. And Lee did very well with the black pieces. So just to show you how that game continued, to give you an idea, after bishop d2, now here I'd be lazy. I would just snap the bishop pair and call it a day. But he was very aggressive in this game. He didn't take that bishop for a long time because he wanted to do other stuff. So he played b6, and he played very, very positionally. And he never quite took the bishop. A lot of times in chess, the threat is greater than the execution. So he just kind of kept that bishop hemmed in, but never actually captured it until he needed to. So after c takes d4, he finally took that bishop pair, and then a b3, we have bishop to b7, taking the light squares. So that's why he did it now, as it makes sense, because now he's got full reign over the light squares. And he ended up just getting this spectacular position where he's got two bishops, he's got control of the light squares, and now he's going to attack with his two bishops. And he got a very, very nice position with black, and white had a hard time defending all the weaknesses around his king, because now he's got all these light squared weaknesses around his king, and his king is really loose. You can put your whole hand in this position. And there was an old joke that somebody told me, that's how you can tell if your position and your king is loose, if you can put your whole hand in your position and you can't touch a pawn. So that's a loose king right there. So rook e1, bishop d5, and yeah, he just started winning material, and he's up a whole piece here, and that's going to be a wrap as long as white can't do anything with this pawn, and white couldn't do anything with that pawn. He tried to get stuff going, but it just wasn't going to happen. Black was able to keep everything under wraps, and he was able to stop that pawn from moving, which is all he needed to do. And black won that game. So that line is again, that's a critical line that can be reached from both move orders. But again, my preference is I cut down on the theory. I don't want to play against somebody's preparation where I have to play against 2, 3, 4 different weird lines. So I'm going to play e6, and I'm going to get to it kind of my way. So e6, bishop c4, and then I'm just going to play knight on g to e7 right away, and just go after just playing d5 immediately. And then after knight f3, again, we can transpose. We can start going back into this line. I can just play d5 immediately if I want as well. And there's actually nothing wrong with this. This is also slight edge black. So like after bishop b3, we're going to actually play a6 was played in the past, and it can be played. Probably better is something like c4. Bishop a4, d4, knight b1, and then we can simply play a6, and we can obtain the bishop pair this way. Because white doesn't have a choice. Like white can't play c3, because now we trap the bishop in a hilarious fashion, with what I like to call the extended Noah's Ark, which is always really cool. So they have to just take on c6, and then I take back with my knight, and this is just clear major advantage black. And that's really what I like about this line, is just exercising kind of the authority to play d5 as quickly as possible in a lot of these lines that people are going to play with the Grand Prix. So a lot of people will play something like e5, but there's actually a really good game that we can follow here. It was played between Margulis and Gregory Serper in Reno back in 2006. And that game went just d6. Serper played d6, ed6, knight f5. And then after knight b5, he simply captured on d6, knight d6, bishop d6, knight e2, queen h4 check, g3, queen back to e7, and that's about as simple as it gets. This is just slight edge black, just because black has better control of the d4 square, and he has better development. When white does eventually castle, white's going to be struggling to hold his squares over here. He's got a lot of weaknesses over here on the king side. So yeah, that game continued very well for Gregory Serper. It actually went very quickly. After d4, Serper just castled, maintaining that development lead. Bishop e3, rook d8, queen d3, cd4, knight d4, bishop d4, e5 resigns. The game is over. The king got stuck in the middle of the board. And we can't capture this pawn, because when we capture back, we're going to be pinning this bishop to the queen, and also we're going to have discovered check possibilities against the king as well. So that's another thing I really like about this line, is it leads to the possibility of quick victories, especially in this line, the path that Gregory Serper went down. Now, it won't necessarily be a quick victory. In the game, I think probably castling a little earlier would have been a major improvement for white, but these positions are still very much slight edge black after knight on g to e7. So again, my recommendation is just knight on g to e7, and then follow up pretty much on the next move, just follow up with d5. Now, if you want to play the super main line, at this point you can transpose, and if you do want to play the main line, I think this is a way to play a slightly better version of the main line to use this move order. Because in this move order, it's much harder for white to play pawn to f5. You've controlled that square before you've played bishop g7. And this is actually kind of a big deal. So anyways, this is how you should go ahead and meet the Grand Prix attack and get a very easy advantage with the black pieces. I hope that you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope that these ideas are something that you can use in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.